Hello and welcome to the live stream for DGST 395. It's Halloween Eve, so today is a spooky edition of the live stream of Applied Digital Studies. I'm Professor Zach Whalen, and I'm going to be your tour guide on this journey into the creepy corners of the internet, or something like that. I don't know what's going on. So let me turn down the background sound and switch into a more, well, this part's not spooky, but I do want to tell some ghost stories today. And there's a reason. This is not totally random. Let's see, try to get back to the beginning. Back to Kate Page, there we go. So I am interested in ghost stories as a kind of storytelling, and I'm especially interested in internet ghost stories. And so I have several that I want to tell you today or talk about. I'm not going to be able to read them all or talk about all of them. But I think there are some interesting things that unite several of these stories under the bigger umbrella that sometimes is called a creepypasta. That is a pretty well-developed genre at this point, and there's plenty of examples. And these are some early examples that I'm interested in. But there are a couple of things that I think are interesting that I would like to suggest you pay attention to as I look at these. This is the first of several that I'm going to talk about today. This is Ted's caving story, and it goes by a couple of different names, but this is an early kind of story in terms of the web. This goes back to 2001, as you can see from the date here. This is hosted on AngelFire. We've talked about GeoCities a bit, and AngelFire was a competitor to GeoCities, but AngelFire is still around, I guess. I don't know if you can make accounts on it still, but it is still around. At least this is. So this is the original thing. This isn't like a copy of it or an archived version. This is the original Ted's caving story. It's still up, and I've got ad blocker running, so you're not seeing all the ads, but it is full of kind of 90s kind of ads and stuff. So I'm going to be telling this story, but the thing I want you to look for in this story and in the others is the ways in which they depend to some extent on plausibility or sounding like it could actually be true. And of course, all ghost stories are true, or the best ones are anyway. And what is interesting about these is that they use the kinds of rhetorical strategies of authenticity and authority that we learn as we use the web, but they're using these here for the purposes of storytelling. So if you kind of rewind back to 2001, when we were thinking about what was on the web, when we talked about web literacy, we talked about ways to kind of make your content seem authentic, to make yourself authoritative, how to determine if a website was authoritative or not. This is something we still do. But at this early stage of the internet, we were kind of figuring out the rules for that. And several of these stories here exploit that flexibility or the developing status of truth claims on the internet. And I think that's why they're interesting, especially this period around the late 90s and early 2000s, which is when several of these stories were originally shared. So I'll read a few pages of Ted's caving story to get us started. I also, while I'm doing this, by the way, in Discord, I shared a story in the general channel on Discord. It's better. This one works better if you check it out yourself as opposed to someone telling it. But I have shared another early creepypasta that is a favorite of mine about a digital camera that I found in the woods. Disclaimer: I did not actually find this digital camera. I just gave you the standard creepypasta text that goes with this gallery of images, and so that's what you're seeing there. I did not actually find this camera, so that's the sort of a spoiler, but. Check it out. You might see some unusual things on those photos. But I'm going to tell you the story about Ted's caving story. So due to the overwhelming number of requests I have received to tell about my discoveries and bizarre experiences in a cave not far from my home, I have created this webpage. I will outline the events that happened to me during the past few months, beginning with my journey into a familiar cave in December 2000 and ending, well, it hasn't actually ended yet. I will use my caving journal as the text to tell about my recent experience. I will give them to you as I experienced them in chronological order. I have included photographs that were taken during my many trips into the cave. I have also created a few illustrations to help the reader get a better idea of what things looked like in the cave. All of the photos were taken by me or one of the few people I went into the cave with. I want to point out a few things before I tell about the events. Most of the pictures were taken with a Kodak disposable type camera. I took a better camera into the cave on one or two of the trips. Pictures on this site are all original photos and have not been messed with or enhanced, other than where noted. As a rule, I get my pictures put onto disk at the time of developing, so I don't have to scan them later. This ensures the best digital quality. I will not reveal the names of the other people involved in this experience. If you know me well enough, you probably know them already. I will not reveal the location of the cave to anyone for any reason. So please don't ask. I refuse to be held accountable for anyone's life but my own. I will refer to the cave as Mystery Cave. That is not its real name. If you think these events sound far-fetched, I agree. I would come to the same conclusion had I not experienced them. I will try to finish the site as soon as possible, check the date on the main page to see where I've made updates. To protect myself from people who might want to copy this site, I include the following. All text on this and following pages are my own words and copyright 2001, Ted. So, the discovery. I'm going to summarize. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'll kind of just hit some highlights here. The blue text is his commentary. The gray text is the text directly from his notes and journals. So, December 30th, 2000. B and I decided to get in one more caving trip before the new year, so we set our sights on Mystery Cave. Not a spectacular cave, but since neither of us had been caving in a while, it would be nice to go to any cave. There was a bit of excitement to this trip. There was a small passage in the lower portion of the cave that I wanted to check out to see if it was possible to get past it. It had a small opening, but lots of air blowing out of it. Even though it is way too small to climb through, I had never even checked to see what was inside the passage. We got our gear loaded up and hit the road by 3 p.m. We got to the cave in great time since B likes to drive fast. We anchored from the usual tree and began to rappel into the cave. I went down first and got my gear together while B came down. After we explored all of the usual passages, we climbed down to check out the hole. The hole is located deep in the cave, near the lowest part of the cave. It is on the side of a cave wall about 3 feet from the floor. To look inside the hole, I had to kneel down to duck under an overhang of a rock. Here's the photo of the opening. And he says, I put my glove in the opening so you can have a size reference. I used my backup mini mag light and held it inside the hole to see what I could see. I was excited by what I saw. The wall around the hole was about 3 to 5 inches thick. It led into a tight passage. The passage opened up a bit just inside the hole. It continued back about 10 to 12 feet in a small crawl space. After that, it seemed to really open up. Although how much we couldn't tell. This could be a virgin passage. Obviously, no one has passed through this route, but there could be a way into the passage from the other side. To even get to the crawl space, we would have to enlarge the opening. Currently, it's about the size of my fist. Once we get past the opening, we would have a tight crawl back to where it opened up. It would take some work, but we thought we could do it. We sat down for a few minutes to rest and contemplate our plan of attack. While we sat there in the darkness, we could hear the wind howling from the other side of the passage. It was a low, eerie noise. We could also hear a low rumble from time to time. No big deal, though. The cave is in the vicinity of a highway that has heavy trucks drive on it. We figured the rumble was the effect of the trucks resonating through the rocks. We determined that our best plan would be to haul a cordless drill into the cave to drill into the rock. Then we could take a bullpen and small sledgehammer and break up the rock. It seemed pretty straightforward. We would widen the hole big enough to squeeze in and see what was on the other side. The efforts to haul all of the equipment down to the hole would be a pain, but we hoped it would be worth it. I named the passage Floyd's Tomb after Floyd Collins. It seemed to look like the tight spot where Floyd spent his last miserable days on Earth. So here's a diagram of what it looks like, obviously just kind of sketchily drawn. Floyd Collins, that's a real story. Floyd Collins is a person who got stuck in a cave, and even though people knew where he was, it was impossible to rescue him, and he died in the cave. Very sad, scary story. We gathered up our gear and headed for the surface. Normally, I couldn't care less if I ever came back into this cave. There's nothing special about it, but now I was psyched about getting back and getting through. We hadn't even left the cave, and we were planning our return trip. Okay, work begins. And I'm going to kind of skim a bit here. To begin work, we had to get down on our knees and do our best to avoid smacking our heads on the ceiling. Working in this awkward position, we would drill into the wall around the hole. That was difficult work. We really had to push on the drill, and it was still slow progress. Then we inserted the bullpen into the hole and hammered on it until the rock broke up. Then we would repeat the process. To give you an idea of how slow it went, the typical size rock that would break off was about fingernail size. If we broke off a large piece, about a third the size of my palm, it was cause for celebration. From time to time, for variety, we would just wail on a cold chisel with a 5-pound sledge. It was slow progress. The problem with the sledge was that we couldn't take a good swing because of the tight quarters. Let's see. We could tell we had done some work in the cave, but it was not much. For the first time since we got in the cave, we sat back, both of us took a break. It was nice to check out the results of our hard work. Then we noticed the howling again. It seemed to be a little louder than the last time we were there. We just figured the wind was blowing a little stronger outside. What we could not figure out was the rumbling. It too seems to be louder and more frequent. This time we could not attribute the noise to trucks. The road that the trucks drove on was not very busy to begin with. At that time of night, it should be dead, yet the rumbling continued. It seemed to be coming from deep within the passage. B said he would ask some veteran cavers what could be causing the noise. So here's their progress so far on caving. This is a bit of a sidebar explaining some of the terminology of caving and kind of what the appeal is. Basically, they describe kind of the allure of discovering a new passage, like the appeal of what they're kind of drawn to. The idea that this might be an undiscovered passage is very much what cavers are looking for. So they're kind of eager to be there and figure this out. Okay, so scarcely 2 weeks had gone by, and already we were on our way back out to work in the cave. We admit we have become obsessed with the idea of getting through the passage. That may be a sign of how exciting our lives really are. It's not that we think there is going to be something great beyond the passage. We just like the idea of being the first humans on the face of the planet to set foot in a virgin part of the cave, although if we found a hidden treasure, that would be fine with us. They took the dog with them, of course. Despite working in the dark of the night, we were able to rig up and get down pretty quick. We didn't take as many tools as last time, plus we left some in the hole so we wouldn't have to haul them out and back in again. I did manage to get 2 more batteries for the drill for a total of 4. Also a few more masonry drill bits. Even with the dog, we made good time getting down. Then something bizarre happened that I can't quite explain, or can't quit explain. The dog began exploring as soon as we let her off the rope. She was in hog heaven, sniffing and darting around at our feet. She would run from one person to the other as we made our way back to the work site. At that point, the cave splits off into 4 passages. The dog seemed to run out of juice. She just stuck right by either B or me. That seemed kind of odd. As we progressed further into the cave, she would only stay by B. She seemed edgy, like she saw something she didn't like. As we approached the short drop-off before the hole, she stopped and would only come further after we coaxed her. The hair on her back stood on end. Finally, as we got to within 20 feet of the hole, she began to whimper and hide behind B. Her tail was between her legs and she was cowering on the ground. Strange. I've seen her square off with dogs twice her size, but now she acted as if Satan himself was lurking in the darkness. I figured there must have been animals that used the cave as home, and Whip smelled their scent. Too bad it upset her, because there was no way she was going into that passage. We decided that with this new development, the nervous dog, one of us would work while the other stayed with the dog a few feet away from where we normally rested. We got right back into our routine. With our extra supply of batteries, we were able to really push through. We were on the 4th battery when the second bizarre thing happened to us. B was working. He had finished drilling a hole and was getting ready to hammer the bullpen when he stopped working and looked into the hole. I was kicking back, almost asleep, and hardly paying attention to B. He had a light by his side to illuminate the work area. I could see in the eerie glow a puzzled and intense look on his face. He looked over at me and shook his head. I asked him what was up. He said that he just heard a strange noise emanating from the hole. He said it sounded like rock sliding on rock, sort of a grinding sound. I assumed his ears were just ringing from the drill. He assured me he heard what he said he heard. I didn't have an explanation, so I went back to dozing. B sat in the quiet of the cave for a long time before he resumed work. Also, he would stop from time to time and just listen. B is very grounded and not one to pursue some imaginary sound. I believed he heard something, but I'm not too concerned about what it was. I assume we will figure it all out once we get through the passage. And I'm just going to kind of skim through this. They keep hearing noises. They keep working on the hole, and it gets bigger and bigger, but this is about the biggest it gets. As you see here, it's very, very small. They describe it as being so small once they finally get in that they have to kind of blow out air out of their lungs in order to compress their chest enough to squeeze into the hole and then progress further. So they basically have to inch along, kind of wriggle along here. Here's where here's another look at the hole, how tight it is for them to squeeze into. This is Ted. And there's a lot of detail here. Basically, it gets the sense of dread keeps increasing. Here's another shot of him inside I don't know if that's B or Ted, but you can see how tight it is. Like a pretty uncomfortable picture, even if there's nothing supernatural going on, right? Like this is a pretty intensely tight place. And obviously it's a real place, whatever it is. So they make it in. Just to kind of, here's how they work. You work your way through it. Exhale, scoot, stop to catch my breath, repeat. So it's the exhaling. You have to exhale to kind of work your way through. It goes on for a bit, and it keeps getting creepier and creepier. I guess I'll just say that. They eventually become obsessed with the cave, as they kind of allude to earlier on. They bring a couple other people down to check things out. They try to get a camera down there with them to capture some of the things, but it doesn't work. Batteries keep dying mysteriously. They smell unusual things. They eventually discover, they do get through eventually, and I think that's the end of it. That's the end of it. So it ends inconclusively, but they do discover, they get through and they do find, they find rocks with these symbols carved in them once they get through the passage. So as you see, they even joke about it, reminding them of the Blair Witch Project, which we'll talk about in a minute. But they increasingly feel that they are not the first people down there, and also that they may not be alone down there. There may be something else down there with them. That's implied in several ways. They also, when they're out in the surface world, when they're out, they increasingly are experiencing paranoia and insomnia, and gradually kind of losing a grip on their day-to-day lives. And so, yep, that's it. So check it out. It's a great story to read by yourself in the dark. So that was my experience of it. I was reading it alone in the dark, and I enjoyed it a lot. So here's another one that's kind of similar. I'll go ahead and kind of tell you a bit more about this one. This one does end a bit more conclusively, although it says it doesn't. This is called the Dianea House, and this one, unlike Ted Caving's journal, Ted has never been identified. The author of this has never been identified. It just exists as it exists here. There is no other information about this. For Dianea House, this is something that's kind of similar, but it does have an explainable origin. It uses the formatting and rhetorical structures of the internet. This claims to be an archive of emails, and so we read it as though we're reading it from an email client, and we kind of hear what's going on. We are reading emails from the standpoint of Eric, and Eric, we were mostly reading the emails that he received from Mark, and then as you can see, it starts to get sinister pretty quickly. This is kind of a standard trope kind of way of doing this, but they're like, hey, you remember Drew? Travis would pick him up most of the time, messy hair, sort of the fanboy type. I didn't remember his last name until I got this thing, and now it's really disturbing me. Do you know what happened? Did you hear about it already? A nice tease right there, you know. So yeah, as it goes, we hear from Eric in the blue quoted text from as Mark is writing it, so we don't ever hear Eric kind of come out and say what his deal is. When this was originally published, it was published in installments. Like every few days there would be a new email, so I remember like refreshing the page to see what was going on. But you know, it reads as a coherent narrative beginning to end. Just as a hint, that it's called the Dianea House. Dianea, it sounds like a nice name, right? Like a Diana or something. But if you just Google Dianea, that is the genus name for Venus flytrap. So that might be a hint about what's going on. But it's a mysterious house that people are unusually drawn to and can't explain why. There seems to be a smell that people describe different ways that seems to attract them to this house, and then murders and other things happen. So it is implied that the house is eating people. So I guess that's a spoiler, but you know, it's worth reading. It's good. It builds the sense of dread really gradually and pretty well, just like Ted's caving story. Okay, Dear David, let's take a look at this one. So I included Dear David even though it's much more recent because I feel that the way that it's structured is very much a throwback. Like it has a lot of the same rhetorical tricks and things that are happening in these earlier stories. It's just updated for Twitter. So the things that we take as evidence that something is true on Twitter, Adam Ellis is using those things to tell us this story here. Adam Ellis is a webcomic creator. He's a blue check verified Twitter account, lots of followers, and he started noticing some unusual things around his apartment and thought he should tell people about it. Throughout this story, I don't think maybe he has since then, but at least as this was going on, he never came out and said, I'm making this up. He consistently claimed that this was true, and people would ask him questions about it, and he would answer them if he could. And as this was going on, he would just do his normal tweeting, like he's just a guy on Twitter, and he would have his normal day-to-day whatever on Twitter. But every now and then he would have an update about what was going on in his apartment. So I will read a few days worth of this, I guess. This is, by the way, this is on a website called Wakelet, which lets you archive tweets and other things in a readable fashion. So that's why it's easier. It's a lot easier to go back through it this way than it is going back on his timeline, which you can do. I mean, these tweets are all still up there. So my apartment is currently being haunted by the ghost of a dead child, and he's trying to kill me. Thread. He started appearing in dreams, but I think he's crossed over into the real world now. The first time I saw him, I was experiencing sleep paralysis and saw a child sitting in the green rocking chair at the foot of my bed. Have any of you had sleep paralysis? Somebody in Discord posted a classic painting about sleep paralysis. But do you know what that is? Have you had that? Yeah. Yeah, I have too. Yeah. Jonah, you've had it? Yeah. Did you have like the child, like the hallucination of somebody watching you like that? Or If you don't mind sharing, I don't want to put you on the spot if you don't want to.
It was after, so I was away at annual training with the reserves.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a really stressful time, and
Yeah.
so when I was doing research, I found out like it happens when you're basically when you like let your guard down. So
Mm-hmm.
it was my first night of like actual sleep,
Hmm.
and I think I woke up, and then there was like a dark figure standing in my doorway.
Yeah.
And I tried to call my brother's name who's in like the room next to me.
Yeah.
I just couldn't talk.
Yep.
And then I
Yeah.
tried to move.
Yeah.
I couldn't move, and I was like, this is sketchy.
It's sketchy. Yeah. That's a.
Apparently that's attached to like different cultures too, which is
Yeah,
really weird.
it
Like
is.
I have a friend who was born in the Philippines,
Mm-hmm.
and he didn't see a dark, like he saw a woman in full white instead of a dark figure,
Interesting.
which
Yeah.
was interesting because that's actually attached to his, but like he didn't
Right.
know that that was attached to his culture. He was
Huh.
like 5.
That's really interesting. Yeah, and I mean, in my version of it, I was kind of sleeping on my stomach or face down, and I felt like something standing on my shoulders. Like it felt like something like pinning me down. And the same thing, I wanted to move and yell, but I couldn't move. And I simultaneously saw something in the door, like standing in the doorway. But it's scary.
Fun podcast that I listen to is called No Dumb Questions.
I don't know it, but yeah, that sounds good. Yeah.
It's like it's a pretty interesting dynamic. So like a
Yeah.
rocket scientist with a professional historian that's like extremely knowledgeable, but
Cool.
they're friends, they're good friends, and they talk about it.
Yeah.
There's one episode on sleep paralysis that was
Nice.
very informational.
Yeah, I bet.
I can put it.
Yeah, share it in Discord if you don't mind. That'd be cool if you can find it.
I've never had sleep paralysis. Like how do you wake up from that?
I don't remember.
Or awake for like.
Yeah, so my understanding is that like normally when you go into REM sleep, your mind is doing whatever, but your body is paralyzed, because if it wasn't, you would be like reacting to all the things you were seeing in your dream. Like so you'd be like punching and running and doing all that kind of stuff, and that would be pretty dangerous. So your body shuts itself down. But sometimes you can wake up where your mind is you are awake, but your body is still in dreaming mode, and so it doesn't work. And so my understanding is that you essentially hallucinate an explanation for why you can't move. So you wake up, you can't move, and so your mind kind of fills in that void of like, oh, there must be something standing on me, or a white lady in the doorway, or whatever it is. So it's really interesting that it's culturally oriented in the sense that your mind kind of draws on whatever signifiers it has available and kind of puts that into this scenario that explains why you can't move. It's really interesting, I guess, but it's terrifying. It's really, I mean, I was like 10 years old, and it still kind of freaks me out, just the memory of that one. I've had similar things every now and then, but that one event of it was pretty disturbing. So I don't recommend it. It's interesting at a like cognitive level, but it's just, yeah, it's horrifying. So, and I think if I remember correctly, so Ginger Snaps in Discord shared the night hag, like a Wikipedia article about the night hag, which is another term for it, and the classic, is it Brunelli? The painting of like a demon sitting on a woman's chest, like that's a famous painting of sleep paralysis. And actually, Cassie, when we read My Favorite Thing is Monsters in a couple weeks in graphic novel, this painting plays an important role in that book. So,
Excellent. I've seen that a lot because
yeah.
I've researched this stuff because I was like,
Yeah.
what does this?
Yeah, indeed. What happens? Yeah, okay. Well, so Adam Ellis experienced sleep paralysis, and he saw, in his case, a child sitting in the green rocking chair at the foot of his bed. And then he goes on to describe this child. And since he's a webcomic artist, he has the ability to draw a pretty good picture. He said he had a huge misshapen head, and it was dented on one side. I did my best to draw it. For a while, he just stared at me. Then he got out of the chair and started shambling toward the bed. I couldn't move because I was paralyzed. I have sleep paralysis fairly often. It sucks. Right before he reached my bed, I woke up screaming. Before he reached, I had another dream a few nights later where I was in a library, and a girl came up to me and said, "You've seen Dear David, haven't you?" I was like, "Who?" And she said, "Dear David, you saw him." She continued, "He's dead. He only appears at midnight, and you can ask him 2 questions if you said Dear David first." Then she added, "But never try to ask him a 3rd question or he'll kill you." I was very shaken. Having 2 dreams about the same thing is pretty weird. Anyway, a couple weeks passed without incidents. Then David came back in another dream. Same situation. I was in bed, and he was sitting in the rocking chair near the window, staring at me. In the dream, I say, "Dear David, how did you die?" He mumbles, "An accident in a store." I say, "Dear David, what happened in the store?" He groans, "A shelf was pushed on my head." I'm frozen with fear. I ask, "Who pushed the shelf?" David doesn't answer. I realize that I've asked a third question, which I'm not supposed to do. At that point, I wake up absolutely terrified. The next couple of days, I Google deaths in the city, but can't find anything about a kid named David dying in a store. I even try different names: Daniel, Dylan, Devin, nothing. A few weeks go by without incidents. Sort of randomly, the apartment above mine is vacated, and I have the opportunity to move into it. It's a larger apartment, so I'm thrilled. Another month or two goes by, and I sort of forget about dear David. I think he lost track of me because I moved upstairs. But lately, something strange is happening. For the past 4 nights, my cats gather at the front door at exactly midnight and just stare at it, almost like something is on the other side. There's a picture of his cats staring at the door. Last night, I got a weird feeling and looked out the peephole, and I'm dead certain I saw movement on the other side. When I opened the door and turned on the hall light, nothing was there, but my cats seemed unnerved, bushy tails, etc. And that's where I am right now. Dear David found me, I think. I don't know what to do. I'll keep you updated. A couple days later, for the 6th night in a row, my cat has walked over to the door promptly at midnight and stared at it. There's his cat staring at the door. What is going on? There's a video. Just a cat meowing at a door. Notice how spooky it is. It's just a cat, but like the context here makes it so much more than a cat. Okay, so I took a photo through the peephole because I'm too scared to open the door. I feel like I saw something. I couldn't tell, so I mustered the courage to open the door. Nothing was out there, but I took another photo. Look at this. Is it just me, or is there something in the first photo right where the banister meets the shelves, hiding on the stairs? Let's take a look. These are up on Twitter still, so here's kind of the normal shot of that location, and then here's through the peephole. And he thinks he sees something there. It's hard to say, though. So he has another shot here. I wasn't sure if it was a smudge or something, so I took a second photo from inside. There was something out there. And yeah, so if you look down in this area, right, so that's the normal shot, and then here's the shot when the cats were alarmed. That's the shot that he took there. Yeah, so something's going on. I deadbolted the lock and got in bed because I don't know what else to do. I can still hear my cat meowing at the door. I am pretty scared. I love this one because it's just a cat in the dark, and cats look freaky in the dark. But that's in the context. It's just this spooky cat. It's been pretty quiet tonight. I'm going to try out a sleep talk app to see if anything happens during the night. Heading to bed, but the cats are back at the door. They only do this in the middle of the night. It's routine now. And here we go, just minutes before midnight. Yeah, again, just a cat meowing. They're both there now, meowing. I don't even know if this is the right kind of salt. So he's trying different things. People in the replies are like, hey, you should try this, you should try, they're giving him explanations or trying to help him make sense of this or give him strategies to detect something. Maxwell is extra talkative. He's trying to tell me something. I used the sound app to record my apartment last night. It makes individual recordings each time it hears something. There were 33 recordings. Most of them are pretty vague. A couple of them are passing cars, but there are 3 that I'm interested in. The first is a snapping sound. That's it. This one is weird because it's the only one that has a strange electric sound throughout. I love seeing the comments on the SoundCloud. Yeah, I don't know. So, and then there's one where he kind of groans in his sleep. All right, getting the F out of my haunted apartment for the weekend. And then there's one that he quotes someone else's tweet, but this tweet has been deleted, so I don't know what it was. But it might have been someone, like it's included in this thread, so maybe it's someone who sees something in this image and is trying to pointed out to him. But I'm looking at the image, and I have not seen anything in it unusual. But this is a classic kind of spot the ghost kind of shot, the way it's framed, right? We have the purported subject of the photo here, this guy, Adam, but we have plenty of background. There's lots of places for a ghost to hide in this picture, so it's very much like lots of other ghost-proof videos and photos I've seen that I know were staged. So as evidence, for example, we have at least 2 surfaces that have reflections in them, reflecting surfaces. Windows and doors and glass are almost, and TVs. These are very often portals. These are often, like psychologically, we kind of think of them as portals. And so that's a place where people often claim to see ghosts. But it also is a place, if you were editing a ghost into this photo, it would give you lots of places to put that. And so I think that might be what's going on here, but I actually don't know where it is. I can't see it. Usually somebody claims to see a ghost, and you'll see like the photo with a big red circle, like, look at this. And I don't see that here, so I don't know where it is. Maybe over here in the door reflection, but I can't really see it. So anyway, weird thing just happened. Take it with a grain of salt. Speaking of media and photos, I bought a Polaroid camera this weekend because they're fun and dorky. I decided to take a few photos around my apartment. Polaroids are stupid and fun and inherently sort of creepy. I didn't expect to find anything, and for the most part, I didn't. And he's right. I think, photos are kind of creepy. Polaroids especially are kind of creepy. They look kind of creepy. But even just the basic idea that we, of course, think about all day and we do all the time, like taking a photo is a kind of a weird thing. It's something that hasn't existed for very long in human history. And as photography, as photographic technology when it was first created, a big thing that people did was like spirit photography. Like, because every photo is a photo of the past. Like, you're always looking at the past when you look at a photo, and you're looking at a picture of someone who no longer needs to exist for the photo to exist, if that makes sense. And so there's something inherently creepy about photography in general. But in the Victorian area, like spirit photography was popular, and those were manipulated shots using double exposures and things to make it look like you take a photo of somebody and then they're like dead parents are hovering behind them. Like, that was a thing you would see a lot. People did that kind of thing. It was fine. But they needed the technology to do that, and I think it's interesting whenever a new technology for recording things exists or becomes popular, it suddenly becomes a way that people record evidence of something paranormal pretty quickly, right? So video, whenever people started getting 8mm film, that's when you started seeing lots of evidence of UFOs, because people could capture grainy footage of something weird in the sky or something weird walking through the woods, and it must be Bigfoot. And I think the graininess, the vagueness of it is what actually makes it seem creepier or more compelling than the quality. Like, if it was a high quality, full HD shot of Bigfoot, like, it wouldn't look real. Like, we would think that's obviously fake. But the grainy Patterson-Gimlin footage of Bigfoot walking through the woods seems more believable because it's worse. And I think that's really interesting. So anyway, he takes a couple of photos of his living room and bedroom. They're pretty unremarkable. Then I went into the hallway and snapped a photo. The Polaroid developed completely black, black rectangle. I even ripped out and opened and destroyed a fresh pack, so it was just an undeveloped Polaroid, but they start out white. Those are expensive, by the way. They're like $12 a pack. I was very surprised by that. We got my daughter one of these cameras, and the camera itself wasn't that expensive, but the film is. The photo on the left is me covering the lens with the finger. The one on the right is my fully lit hallway taken just after midnight. And he has a video of himself taking these photos and then developing them, and then it develops like this. And this is his photo of the hallway developing. And it just kind of takes it a minute, but that's how photos develop, how these Polaroids, and this idea that they sort of gradually take on a shape, that's a part of their spookiness, I think. Yeah. And in the hallway, this is just him doing it again as proof, right? Then he takes a picture on the left with his phone, then takes a picture of the same space at the same time with his Polaroid, and the one on the right is what he gets from the Polaroid. Right? Pretty spooky. All right, so folks have been urging me to get some sage, so I did. And then tries a few things, staging the hell out of this rocking chair. The morning after, sage did not work. He has a dream about David, smoke in the dream. Cats are still watching the door every night. The house is shaking sometimes. He has the impression that it's vibrating. feels like there's something ominous coming. It's supposed to be a severe thunderstorm, but it doesn't materialize. He gets a nanny cam. Oh yeah, this is the one. He dreams that David is dragging him through a warehouse by the arm, and then he wakes up and he has bruises on his arm. Pretty spooky. Could be a totally logical explanation, but doesn't know what it is. Then he thinks this warehouse next door is the one he dreamed about. He finds it empty except for a chair. And let's see. Cats are acting weird. He's getting unknown callers all the time. He finally answers. And there's like a quiet sort of staticky sound. And then after a minute, a tiny voice says hello, and then hangs up. Something about the way they said hello freaked me out. It wasn't a question or a greeting, just a hello. A flat statement, so quiet I can barely hear it. I panicked and hung up. I didn't know what else to do. I closed all the curtains in my apartment and turned on every single light. So here's the green chair that David first appeared in the sleep paralysis event. And he's thinking, maybe if I move, maybe if I go on vacation. He's getting ready to go on vacation, so he gets a nanny cam so he can keep an eye on his cats while he's in Japan. And this is the kind of camera that only records if it detects movements. So he got a couple of notifications from it. So keep an eye on the chair. There it goes. See the chair moving? Spooky, right? All right, so he has another one. Another alert. Keep an eye on the bookshelf. Yeah. Something fell off the wall. If you missed it the first time, look above the shelf. It's a little turtle shell that I hung on the wall. He has a picture of the shell here. These nanny cams, these are also, I think, really kind of creepy too. It's happening again, thread. I've been leaving the nanny camera on 24/7. It records every time there's something going on. He picks up his cats, so watch his cats. Maxwell is this one here. As he says, Maxwell kind of freaks out and jumps over something invisible, and then looks up here to the right as though he's looking at someone. And then kind of freezes. He also, what did? Which one? Oh, on the table? Oh man, I didn't notice that. Yeah, it does. Good call. That's probably what Max was looking at. Then this is one, yeah, Max is frequently like standing up like this, which I think is like a really creepy, when cats do that, I think it looks weird. But then this is what it records this is a video of that pose, I think, what he's doing in that pose. How do I get to this? The way Twitter unrolls threads is really confusing. Oh yeah, here he is. In that spot. He's trying to grab something out of the air. Could be a moth, could be a bug. It's not unreasonable that cats would swat at something that you can't see on a camera. But with everything else going on, right, it seems pretty creepy. I can't shake the feeling that something has made its way into the apartment. And so nightmares continue. He goes to Japan, and David sort of follows him there. This is a photo that he took inside of the warehouse. And he says in the upper right, there's something that looks like a face. And I can't quite see it, so I don't know. I'm not sure if it's like a face sort of behind the door or if it's like up close and translucent. I don't know if oftentimes people will kind of, oh yeah, I can kind of see it. Yeah, so eyes, nose, head, then like the dent in the head right there. Yeah, maybe so. Okay. Oh yeah, and here's someone else who's elaborating with red circles. I just had be fun to do a Twitter bot where you take just like random photos and then put red circles on different parts of the photo just randomly and say like, look at this, so just do it with a computer program so there's nothing there necessarily, but like putting a red circle around it, it might make it look like there's something there. I think I'll do that later. Okay, so anyway, basically, I mean, we're only about halfway through it here. He sees this weird statue in Japan that looks kind of like David, so that's kind of freaky. This kid with the sort of caved-in head. And he makes it back home. Things seem to be going okay, but the electronics are getting weird. He keeps hearing the sound, it's shaking. He goes and has breakfast. And it goes on and on. This is another shot out the peephole where allegedly you can see David. This is his ear right here. This one's a bit easier to see if you kind of know which part of it to turn into a face in your mind. And yeah, pretty creepy. And so I will share this thread if you want to keep reading it. David does keep appearing on camera. He sets up a camera in his bedroom to record what's going on in his bedroom at night, and David makes some appearances. So it's pretty spooky. I will just say as a disclaimer, I think Adam Ellis is a talented digital content creator already. Like, we know this. He's a webcomic creator. I think he's trying a different kind of storytelling here, and I think being quite successful at it in terms of using the kind of reliability criteria that we expect on Twitter to tell this ghost story, and I think it's very well done. So I think it's just I don't think it's true in a sense, but I think it is true in the sense that it's a good ghost story, and ghost stories are all ghost stories are true, right? A couple other things I wanted to share and talk about. This is a website for the Blair Witch movie. Have you all seen the Blair Witch Project? Anybody seen it? You have? Yeah. Cassie, Jonah, have you seen the Blair Witch Project? Okay, yeah, you probably would remember it if you did. It's pretty unusual. But one of the things that is a little hard to appreciate now is that there was a marketing campaign for this movie that convinced a lot of people that it was a true story, like it was actually a real footage. And it's totally believable if you watch the movie. I think it's well done as a found footage. There were earlier examples, but it really kind of kicked off the found footage horror genre, like the idea of like you find a mysterious tape and here you play it back and then you see somebody's last minutes on Earth. But the Blair Witch, I think, was one of it really was a breakthrough in terms of doing that. But what they did to help it seem real is they built a lot of mythology around it that doesn't show up in the movie. It just shows up in websites like this. And they also did a documentary that aired on the Sci-Fi Channel that was like telling the story about the curse of the Blair Witch. And it was all very straightforward. Nowhere in the Curse of the Blair Witch does it claim to be false. They have like archival news footage. They have interviews with local historians. All of it talking about this history of this thing, the Blair Witch story, which of course was not true. They made it up for the movie. So it was pretending to be true using the kinds of media references that we would expect of something true, like a documentary. So it's very good in that sense. And I think it was so successful, it of course contributed to the success of the film, but it also it contributed to something that I remember pretty vividly, people really believing this was true and like really freaking out about this movie. And concern about the people that go missing, the concern about should we be worried about witches? Like, what should we do about this? This was filmed not too far from here, so it even kind of looks familiar if you look at how the woods look that they get lost in. They look like the woods around here. So a great example of digital marketing and spooky storytelling. Okay, so one more thing before we go. Yes, it is super spooky, Amber. I see you on Discord. One of my favorite kind of early internet ghost, viral YouTube ghost memes, or not even a meme. This is footage of an alleged haunting in a kitchen in California, and this one is one of my favorite. It's not as well known in some cases as other ones like this, but I think it's very nicely done. I think you'll see why. So I'll play this. It's just a minute or two long, and then I'll wrap up the stream. So this is actually a re-upload of it. This is from 2008, but I think it was a couple years earlier. So hold on. Let me see what it says here. At night, we would close our pantry door. In the morning, it would be open. we decided to film the door at night and find out why. I can't believe what I captured on film. What you're about to see is real. Of course it is. If you can't hear him, he's just saying what time it is and that he's recording. So that's it. So this is, they did more in this series that was just kind of went by the name Pantry Ghost. And, I think there's plenty of evidence that it was constructed, faked, but I think it's still very compelling. And just like that moment when the face comes up, it's just so well timed. It's just, it gives me the chills every time, even though I've seen this probably hundreds of times by now. So anyway, that's it for class today. Hope you have a spooky time this weekend, I guess, but not too spooky. I don't know. It is Halloween weekend, so be cool. The thing coming up next week, the quiz or the survey, people were interested in interaction or designing for interaction, so I'll put some stuff together around that, but also maybe throw in a bit about hacktivism as well, because that was pretty interesting as well. So thanks for watching, and if you were watching this later, tell us your favorite ghost stories in Discord, or your internet ghost stories, or just whatever your real life experiences are. If you've ever seen a ghost, tell us about it on Discord. All right, so I'll wrap up the stream. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I'll see you later.